Okay, welcome everyone to this video recording with Dr. Mark Howard on the spiritual nature of addiction recovery. This is the Infinite Recovery Project. I'm Jason Shiers, the founder, and I had a conversation with Mark about doing this, over email, and then I kind of thought this is really pointing to the fundamental foundation of the Infinite Recovery Project on how we see addiction and the spiritual nature of it versus the traditional explorations and understandings of addiction treatment, where you might call it a model of illness or a model of a measurement of pathology. It's kind of like of people's struggles, whereas in this understanding we look more towards what's right with people rather than what's wrong with
Yeah.
people. So I'm going to just start off there and sort of see where we want to start. Um,
Well, oh, yeah,
Go on.
Jason.
No, go
Well,
on. I'll let you start.
I was just going to say thank you. Well, it's great to be with you, and I really love to be able to speak to this topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, like, for me, it's like people have been so, anyone that's come to addiction recovery has probably had more than one attempt. It's rarely we find somebody that comes for the first time. It's kind of, and everyone has been in the system to some extent or another. They've either been put on drugs for their drug addiction, or they've been to some sort of anonymous program. It's like, or they've been to a therapist, that's been based in a traditional psychological theory, or they've been in a rehabilitation center that's been a combination of 12 steps and some counseling psychotherapy type approach. And in a way, they've learned of innocently this disease or this idea of something that's wrong with them, and they've like I did, like when I first went into rehabilitation was 1994, and I was told that I had a disease. It was incurable, it was fatal, but I could do something about it on a daily basis that would allow me to arrest. That was the word used, arrest the process of addiction, and I could find recovery from that place. Um, and many people have kind of adopted this label, idea, belief about themselves, that there's something
Hmm.
broken, something unfixable, something unexplainable. It's often described as an unexplainable phenomena that nobody can really find the roots of. There are um, various theories about hereditary and kind of like
Sure.
and young experiences and trauma and so on and stuff like that happen in early childhood or even in the womb, for some people. And people just innocently take on this idea that there's something wrong with them and that they need to be fixed, and as I did, for many years, tried to fix myself, like, and I say innocently because quite naively as well. I mean, I think that I was so desperate at the time that I went to rehabilitation that I would have believed
Yeah.
anything, anything that one gave me relief as to the idea of myself that I held in my own mind. It's kind of like as a completely flawed, damaged, broken, ruined person that had committed all sorts of crime and created all sorts of chaos in their life. So, in one way, having this disease was a kind of a get out of the guilt card. It was like, oh, I've got this thing that's wrong with me. So it kind of, it in some way, it frees me from that part of my identity that I really didn't like. And in another way, it gave me a hope. It gave me a hope. And I'm not saying it's the only way to get hope, but it gave me some hope that there was another way. When I was desperate, and for many years I stayed in that idea of myself in that broken, trying to fix myself model, in all sorts of variations of that, in therapy, in 12 steps, in different support groups, in trying every new thing that came out onto the market, and going into therapeutic communities, going to events, retreats, all sorts of stuff that was all created in the idea of there being something wrong, whether it be trauma, addiction, low self-worth, all the psychological sort of theories. It's kind of like, but it was really, I used to describe it like whack-a-mole, I guess. You know, it was kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I would get rid of one addiction issue, could be relationships, food, gambling, any sort of struggle that I was having, and another one would pop up, you know, and it's like, and I would just be moving from these one things to another to try and fix it, you know. So that I think that's my experience, coupled with some sort of theoretical understandings of the process that I was in. You know, it's like for a good starting point, and that's and really what we want to talk about today is seeing a different perspective. You know, what one thing that when I was caught up in my beliefs about addiction and what was wrong with me, you know, it's like no one had ever said to me, maybe you're looking in the wrong direction.
Mhm.
Maybe you're kind of, maybe it's not true, all these things that you think about yourself. I mean, that had never been, no one had ever pointed me to that, you know, and I didn't actually know anyone that had truly like freedom as we know it today. You know, I didn't know anyone that had truly found freedom, respite from trying to fix themselves, you know, that just lived a life of joy, well, not of perfection, you know, but of kind of mostly of joy, of freedom from their obsessiveness, you know, like, and that's what I found, you know, in this, in a more spiritual approach to addiction, in finding out what was right with me versus what was wrong with me, you know.
Well, you covered a lot of how people can get into continuing to evaluate yourself themselves and try to do many different things to fix themselves. What we discovered and what I realized for myself and for bringing that into the program I ran for 28 years is that all human beings are part of a spiritual energy that is this pure energy that um, is really, love and understanding. That that even that we're, you know, described as having a disease is just an idea, because what we truly are is way beyond that. Um, uh, so, I mean, in being human, I think that everybody who is using something outside of themselves, they're trying to get a different feeling. They're trying to get a different feeling than what they're in. And so people try many different things. And what hooks people to begin to uh, do that compulsively is really that people think that what they're doing is why they feel better. So people drinking or using drugs or shopping will start to do that compulsively and move it maybe into an addictive way, because they really believe that what they're doing is why they feel better. But what we discovered is that what really happens is when we're doing that thing, for example, just at the beginning, let's say, of an addiction, a person comes home from a stressful day at work, has a couple of martinis, and they get relaxed. Well, what's really happened is that while drinking those martinis, they let go of their stressful thinking. They let go of painful thinking. And when you let go of your troubled thinking, your true nature, these beautiful feelings of love and understanding, well being, happiness that are truly within the consciousness of all of us, comes up. And, I've seen that because there are times when, with people in our program, who will say that, oh man, the alcohol, I really didn't get feeling better drinking two martinis. I needed a third martini to feel better. So if people don't change their thinking, the drug's not going to have an effect on them. It may probably finally have them pass out or, go to sleep. But really, what the point is that we discovered is that why people feel better when they do something addictively or compulsively is because their thinking changed. And it was really what I wanted to share with people so that they really saw that they changed their thinking. They let go of their troubled thinking. And and so this true nature, this spiritual energy we are all a part of, that really is beyond our personal thinking, um, begins to show up and help us out with life situations. So that's the hook. The hook is beginning to see that the way you use this beautiful gift of thought that you're given at birth to think about your life, to think about your moment to moment experiences, the way you're using it is creating the experience you're having in the moment, the feelings you're getting. And that insight, that realization for people helps them begin to get freedom to think any way they want to think. And that's been the hope of our programs. Once people come in and realize they're not really uh, diseased, they just don't understand their true nature and the way that thought plays out in their lives. Once they understand that, they can actually live in a different level of consciousness. So we also discovered, as Sydney Banks, who really originated the approach we call the three principles, what we also discovered is that recovery, spiritual recovery, is contentment. Contentment is something that we all have available for ourselves 24/7. It's a consciousness, it's a state of mind, it's a place within us, really in our soul, where if you really can experience contentment, you're not thinking about yourself. You're just in these beautiful, beautiful feelings of peace because you're satisfied with who you are. You're not thinking, I need something more. You're not thinking, I'm lacking something, because in the feelings of contentment, in the feelings of pure love, in the feelings of understanding, um, it's not personal. It's an impersonal state that you can find that exists within you now and brings you to a level of consciousness that transcends your addictive thinking, your habitual compulsive ways of looking at life. And that, to me, is pure recovery. I'll tell you how I discovered it, a short story about it, but I was sharing what I've been sharing with you to a group of people in recovery. And I was talking about how people will attribute a nice feeling to what they're using, and that really it has something to do with the fact that they just changed their thinking, and that thought created um, the feelings they were having. And so somebody raised their hand and said, I don't use because I'm in trouble thinking. I use cocaine. I just use to get higher. And I thought about that. We had a lunch break, and I reflected on that. And then I realized what I'm sharing with you. Um, when we're talking about the feeling of contentment, that's what everybody's looking for. In the feeling of contentment, you're not thinking to get higher. You're at peace, knowing you're fine. You're satisfied with not life, but you are, but you're just in this place where um, you're not really thinking about how you're doing, you see? So even though that person was using cocaine to get higher, not to get out of trouble thinking, he really wasn't in the true feeling of contentment Because in the true feeling, which is our true nature, you wouldn't want to do anything more. You're fine. You're home. Some people say, "Oh, I found home. I'm back home." I had these feelings when I was a kid. I would just feel like nothing could stop me. I just felt great. So that's the key to a true recovery is gaining a level of understanding about what you truly are and how you can create an experience that troubles you and where that comes from so that you get more freedom of thought and you live at a higher level of understanding, higher level of consciousness, a higher level of awareness than that level of addiction. And when people came to our program and realized we were talking to this, that's all we were talking to people about in different ways, and we saw them way beyond not only addiction, but way beyond any idea they had about themselves. Because people in our area came in saying, "I have an addictive personality." Well, that's not so. Nobody has a personality. A personality is just the thinking you're doing habitually at that level of consciousness. Well, you can always see more. You could always understand more and take yourself to a whole new way of thinking. So we had many, many people in our program be, you know, change from angry people to loving and understanding human beings in their marriage, with their kids, in their work. And so they transcended a so-called addictive personality. So there are a lot of ideas that trap people into keeping themselves in a lower level of consciousness. And so we always pointed to people that they really were their true nature was much more than what anybody could ever think about or define.
Yeah, I love that. There were so many things in what you said, which I've thought about, and that's why I don't have a goal for people of abstinence. I think in traditional processes, abstinence is the goal, but in this recovery, peace of mind, is the goal. It's kind of like
Yeah,
one comes as a byproduct of the other, not the other way around. It almost seems that in order to have peace of mind, you have to have abstinence, but it's the other way around. It's kind of like when you have peace of mind, you won't want to medicate your experience, like you were saying. And how that comes about. I mean, I like the story that you said. It's kind of like about one of the stories that I tell about that is how people misattribute a quiet mind to meetings, and then kind of think that they need meetings all the time. It's like that people get into this busy state of mind, and they have this thought, oh, I need a meeting. I'm really struggling, so they go to a meeting and they get to feel better. They leave the meeting and they say, oh, I feel so much better now, I've been to a meeting. But what they don't realize is by being present and listening to people, that their own thinking goes quiet, their mind goes quiet. That's why they feel better. Not the fact
yeah,
that they went to a meeting, but then they've misattributed not that there's anything wrong with meetings, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there's a misattribution of where the good feeling comes from. It comes from within you, not from going to the meeting. But then they continue in that process. Every time they feel bad, they think they need to go to a meeting to feel better. But when I try to say to people, well, you can feel better now. It's kind of like you can feel better at any time by realizing the source of your struggles is within you. It's not outside of you. Um, and
that's so true, and it's really beautiful what you're helping people see. Um, and again, it's nothing against meetings. If people go to meetings with the understanding that when they're there, the reason they're getting a good feeling is because they're quieting their thinking.
mm,
They could listen and maybe hear something when people are sharing. They may hear a grain of wisdom
yeah,
because wisdom's everywhere.
yeah,
Now, if people could look at that, they could see that probably along the drive to the meeting, they're already feeling better, anticipating the meeting.
Yeah.
So it helps people see it's not so much the meeting that's causing them to feel better. It's that while they're at the meeting, they've quieted their mind.
Yeah.
So they can then take in maybe the love and the support that's in the meeting, you see. But if you see that, then you can begin to help yourself with thinking that's in your way of your own well-being or happiness anytime, because that's all that's happening for you and me, is that when we get to thinking too much about ourselves, it takes us away from self-esteem or beautiful feelings or the wisdom we're looking for. That's the key. That's
Yeah.
the key.
I often
Yeah.
refer to addiction as an innocent attempt to quieten the mind. It's kind of like
Yeah.
that's all it
Yeah.
is. It's
That's what
kind of
it is. Yeah.
that we have an experience inside us. It's kind of like what I call obsessive thinking of the mind and often compulsion of the body, which becomes a compulsion of the body that we can't be with, that's so uncomfortable that we then have to reach for a process or a substance. It's kind of like, and then, and this is what, when you were talking earlier, it made me think about often I ask people, at what point did you feel better? And it's kind of like, was it after you took the drugs or was it when you made the decision to go to take drugs? And it's always when they made the decision. So it's kind of like they didn't even get the drugs in their body or the alcohol
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
the addictive process and they already felt better. That should tell you something about what's going on. It's kind of like, so we have the obsessive thinking of the mind, the compulsion of the body. It's kind of like, and we have to do something. And when we go towards, or we make the decision to, or we find a substance, it's kind of like the mind goes quiet. The body stops, the contraction and the compulsion. It's kind of like stops within us. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to stop this thing that we can't be with, that's within us.
I love that you're talking about the innocence. It's really, to me, the innocence of the human condition. To just try to find this beautiful feeling we were born with, to just feel better. And once people can hear what you're sharing or what we've shared in our program, they get hopeful because something resonates with them that there's truth here. They may not see it yet, but they know this is true. Nobody really in their hearts will buy their disease for the rest of their lives. But there's nothing else to hang their hat on until they hear a sense of these principles that they truly are well-being and esteem and wisdom, that they have a way of looking at life that brings peace and helps them get freedom from their troubled, fearful, or painful thinking, that that's possible. When people can really hear that that's possible, which is really what we point people to, they're hopeful, they're engaged, they want to learn that.
Yeah.
They really do want to give up ideas about themselves that limit them. And but it's innocent. See, the whole thing is really, people have to understand the innocence of it, no matter how much it's cost you in your life. You can always wake up. When you wake up, you're going to be in these beautiful feelings and the wisdom, and your life will move in the direction of happiness and well-being and creativity. But we're all caught up in that. We're all caught up in um, thinking that we can do something outside to bring about a different feeling. Now, that doesn't mean uh, you can enjoy going to shop or you can enjoy exercise. Um, but you want to see that the reason you're getting a nicer feeling from it is that your mind got quieter while you were there. And also, it may have got quieter while you were on your way. Yeah, I have a story about that too. Someone in our program who was addicted to marijuana called me up after 3 months of being away from the program and doing very well and said, I had a relapse. I got to come in and talk to you. And so he came in and I said, well, what happened? He said, well, I just had this really stressful day and I just realized I need to get some marijuana to just relax my mind. And so I went home and changed and then drove to my dealer and got some. I said to him, now tell me something. When you were driving to your dealer, did you feel differently? Were you still stressed out? Oh no, I started to feel better. Well, there you go. You see, your thinking had already changed. You were already quieting your mind. That's why you started feeling better. Now, maybe the marijuana had some impact on relaxing your brain or something, but the true feeling that you were looking for already existed before you had any marijuana on board.
Mm.
And that helped him wake up a little more to the power of the nature of thought that that we can really recognize when we're thinking, and that for example the stressful things he was feeling were really that he was just caught up in a lot of stressful thinking, and he himself could quiet that down and maybe see what to do with everything on the outside once he quieted down. So there are stories like that all over the 28 years I worked in the program of people feeling better before they either drank, used a drug, or even went shopping. And
Mm.
so that helped them wake up to the fact like, oh, wait a minute, I'm changing my thinking even before I use the drug. And
Yeah.
that's the key is I can change my thinking.
I, I, I love to talk to for you to talk to the like why people struggle so much to see this, because like I find that I don't know about you, but for me, I'm often the first port of call where someone says to me, you're the first person that's ever said to me there's nothing wrong with me. It's kind of like you're the first person that's pointed out that addiction is really an innocent, like our true nature, just kind of like finding an escape from what I'm innocently doing with my mind. It's kind of like it makes perfect sense if the mind body is a self-correcting system, which it is in all ways. I mean, you don't digest your own food or pump your own heart or digest your own food. It all works by itself. So it makes sense that, I mean, you heal your own cuts, your bones mend by themselves. It's like everything just works. It's kind of like, so if I'm innocently creating a busy mind, it's like then addiction could be seen as the steam valve of the pressure cooker. Like everything working exactly as it should be. Because if there was no steam valve for the pressure cooker, it would probably just explode, which, as we talking about it in a mental health perspective, could be a psychosis or suicide. For example, that might be the next two options if you didn't have a way of letting off steam. And
Mhm.
but what's difficult, I think, is people that have been particularly in the system, or now how much consumable media we get, videos, social media. People have adopted ideas and beliefs about themselves about what's wrong with them. From the amount of media and that they've consumed, the people they've spoken to, and trying to tell them that they're okay or point them to their innate wisdom, or seeing that the system's working exactly as it should. It's like it's often people struggle to see that, because they've been so much in that old understanding. It takes a while. Like I often ask, does a fish know it's swimming in water? It's kind of like, as human beings, can we really see that we're living in a world of thought, because we're so close to it, that we can't actually see it.
Well, I think what we failed, what we forgot actually is that there's another resource to learn. There's another way to learn. So all of the media and so forth is focused on our intellect. But what you and I are speaking to is that human beings can learn by realizing innate wisdom that lies within the consciousness of all people. We must learn by a realization of this, a waking up of it. It can't be an intellectual understanding. That's what's frustrating for people. There are a lot of approaches in psychology that really work on people with their working at changing their thinking. We look at people realizing a truth about what we truly are and what is really creating the experience we're having in this moment through that insight. When people have that, they change. When people have that, they see how to make use of their thinking, how to make use of thought on their own. So I've had people say to me, oh, wow, I hadn't seen that before. I realized all of a sudden that I'm thinking everything that comes to my mind. I'm thinking it. No wonder I'm stressed out. I see now that I can lay off of a lot of my thinking. So there's somebody who had an insight and now found their own way to take care of themselves. So I don't think that people trust that. I don't
Mm.
think people really can have faith that there's a new there that they really have a wisdom that they can realize that will give them that will take them to a way of understanding life beyond this addictive process, way beyond it. And so that's what's happening is that we haven't we've forgotten that there's a whole new way that a whole way that human beings learn about their own true nature and about the nature of life. And the intellect can only carry us so far before it gets us into trouble of stressful thinking or so forth. So when you speak to people and I speak to people, it's to help them kind of begin to see that the truth that um, they have to stay reflective about what we're sharing. They have
Mm.
to just open up to it. They have to look around and see if it doesn't ring true for them. And then something will show itself. A realization will come. So for me, I heard something in a seminar I went to with Sydney Banks, and it woke up for me a realization that has carried me from that day forward with more and more evolution of that understanding. But I think that's the thing. So people stay with it, you know, and you will find your own insights into, what Jason or I are speaking to. But we have that available to us, and I'm sure people have had experiences of that already in their lives. When they realized, for example, that this person really meant well, or they realized, I really need to apologize for this, or they've had some insight into, how their thinking has really led them to be harmful to someone. Those are realizations and insights. There's just a deeper essence of those that comes from this wisdom to guide us beyond the beliefs of the day.
Yeah. And I was thinking when you said earlier about the intellect, and kind of like people hearing things and using their, what I call the sum accumulation of all the knowledge that I've gathered in the time that I've been thinking. That's how I refer to my brain, as a computer. It's kind of like it's as good as the information that it has, but it's the worst tool in the box for helping me find freedom. It's like,
Mhm.
so when we speak to that part in people, that's innocent, that's where, to somebody's heart versus their intellect. There's something like there was in me for sure. There's a part of me that recognizes, that feels that resonance with what's being said, even before my own intellect can make any sense of it, and I think that's what you said before about people getting hopeful. It's kind of, it's the first, and like I said, it's the first time people say to me, it's the first time anyone's ever said that I'm okay, that there's nothing wrong with
Mhm.
me, because every
Mhm.
other therapist or program or thing that they've been in has confirmed that they're broken and that they need fixing, whereas I'm saying, and I'm guessing, I'm sure what you're saying is that there's nothing wrong with you. You've just kind of got lost along the way somewhere. And when you sort of wake up to what's true about who you are and how a lot of the struggles that you're having, are just created in the mind, it's like then everything can change now, right? It doesn't require a long, arduous, drawn out, analytical approach to your problems.
Well, yes, and here's the innocence about it is no human being can avoid growing up, developing habits of the ways habits of thinking that lead to insecurity or greed or troubling thinking. Uh, it's the nature of growing up in our world right now, and so that's the innocence of it. That's the self-acceptance that you're doing all you can do given the thinking you're in right now. And the wisdom you have, as you were saying earlier, is guiding you to a way to take care of painful thinking. But the cure is really understanding the nature of thought, that you have this beautiful gift to create in your mind thoughts, images that give you the experience of what you're thinking. That realizing that, not intellectually grasping that, brings freedom of thought. People begin to see they could think anywhere, anyway, about any circumstance that comes their way. And that's really the freedom everyone's looking for, the freedom from their habitual thinking. Addiction is a habitual thought. It's a thought that uh, is trying to help us find a nicer feeling. And all we've got in front of us is that level of consciousness we're in, which says that we got fooled, innocently fooled, thinking that, oh yeah, those martinis really helped me. Oh yeah, that that joint really helped me, or that whatever. Shopping, I really love shopping because, oh man, I just feel so great in the malls. Um, and so, really understanding how thought creates those feelings wherever you are gives people freedom. You see, then you can choose to enjoy yourself anywhere. Then you can choose to recognize, well, you recognize when you're caught up in your trouble thinking and allow yourself to come back to a nice, quiet place inside you. So, but uh, everybody, when we talk, will say, oh, yeah, I know it's my thinking. Now, how do I change it? But that's an intellectual sense of it.
Yeah.
But what you and I are talking about is truly seeing that your experience really is coming from the way you're looking at it, the way you think.
Mm.
And so once you see that your way, you see life in a much more positive way. You have more access to love and contentment, happiness, connection to other people. And so, how can there be something wrong with you? Is that if when you realize this little truth, you live in the world of well being, you live in the world of loving, you live in the world of understanding others. You see?
Mm.
So, so that's just people's ideas are trying to describe that the awful case of addiction. And the difficulty, really, I think, with people. sustaining recovery. And I think the beautiful thing of what you and I found is the understanding through realization that sustains recovery. I've had people with this understanding, many, many, many people in our program who have done well, graduated, gone out, had a relapse, but immediately come back, kind of get themselves centered again, learn some more, and go out. So even though that may happen, they know it isn't a disease. They just know they got caught up again in their insecure habitual thinking and just needed to come back and get a reminder, see something a little more.
Mm.
But there are hundreds of people that have had realizations and share in our program how their lives are changing for the better and just live. I did, my program was in this community that had just a lot of close cities to it, you know? And I'd be walking in a downtown area. Somebody say, "Hey, Dr. Howard, and oh man, I'm 5 years I'm 5 years now doing well. I got married." You know, they're telling me all these wonderful things.
Mm.
And in a Starbucks store, people will come up to me and say that, you know, and I welcome it. I keep confidential and private until they open up about it, you know.
Mm.
But they're so joyful that they learn something that can sustain. Uh, and this understanding, once you have it, you never lose it. That's why when you learn something as an insight or a realization, it's there for you the rest of your life. It'll always come back and remind you, hey, you're looking at this wrong. Your thinking's going south. Take it easy. But that'll come from wisdom, not from your intellect.
Yeah. Like to quantify that a little bit for me, I mean, I first had realized, that my thoughts were not who I was. I had this realization that I'd kind of um, made up this story of victimhood of
Yeah,
suffering, and then I'd escaped from the very story that I was making up on a daily basis in my own mind, right? But I'd not. So I'd started to see, it's like what I say to people is once this little crack kind of appears in this
yeah, yeah.
so-called reality, then I call it the domino effect. It's like everywhere I start to look, I start to go, well, hold on a minute. Is that real? Is that real? Is that real? And it's like all these areas of my life, different areas, started to fall over, so to speak, in how I perceive them. And it was a little bit, like it throws you a little bit, when you start to think, shit, it's like, but it was a while after that I kept having these insights, and I was watched a video of somebody, and I realized that even Jason was a figment of my own imagination. It's kind of like you said, there's no personality inside. There's no fixed character. There's just me as I think myself up to be, on a daily basis, and the story that I tell myself about Jason. It's kind of like, and that one really, I started laughing when I saw that video because I thought, oh shit, it's like even I'm not real, even I'm a, a a figment of my own imagination, so to speak, and that was quite a, once that door had opened, I started to question all sorts about life. Who am I as a human being? What am I made up of? And how is my whole world? How did I get like to where I am and all this? And it was quite an amazing, and it is for many people that I've worked with, an amazing realization that like what I thought to be fixed, solid, concrete evidence of this material reality that I lived in just all completely fell apart and didn't even wasn't even true.
I just love that because I always share this when I'm told to present something about recovery or addiction, that it's just beautiful that um, um, we can transcend the level of addiction. And so for me, growing up, I grew up as a boy in the 50s and I played athletics and so forth. So I think what I picked up from all of that was in those days, I was right. As a man, had the right way. So
Mm,
I would get angry a lot, not physically, but I would. And so you could say I had an angry personality. But once I had a realization that those emotions are just made up from the way I'm thinking, I changed. I'm not an angry man. That's 0.5% of my experience now. When it comes up, I easily see it for what it is, like you were saying, and I drop it. I'm a much more understanding. I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you the the hope is we can transcend these habitual ways we've been conditioned innocently to be.
mm,
So Mark Howard, I look at Mark Howard, and I'm not an angry person. I'm much more than anything I can imagine, as you were saying,
yeah.
and I'm just a level of consciousness, a level of understanding. And then there's another level to see. That's the other hopeful thing here. It's not that you just see one aspect of this of these principles, is that you can see more. And once you open up the floodgates of insights and realizations, you're open to seeing more and more across the board of your life.
Mm,
So as I progressed, I realized how I could heal my relationship to my boss. I saw how, through an insight, I saw how I needed to go to her and apologize for my demandingness. And, um, and then my heart opened up, and I just told her I wanted to work to support her. And she was so touched by that. She said, I want to support you and your program too. She was so touched by my change that she started to go to seminars with me to learn more about these principles.
mm.
So, I guess what I'm saying by that is the beautiful hope here is you have within you right now the capacity to live beyond addiction, and that addiction is coming from conditioned ways of thinking, learned ways of thinking. You're not wedded to that. That is something big time,
Yeah.
because there's so much out there that is is categorizing people into a personality and
Mm,
then trying to cope with the personality. Well, you're more than that, and then you're more of that, then more and more. The more you see, the more you really move to a loving, understanding being. And that doesn't mean, see, I'm not that this is spiritual. The love and understanding is spiritual. People take it into the physical world and say, well, then I'm going to be a patsy for everyone. I'm going to be a welcome mat for everyone. But that's not what we're saying. We're
no.
saying you move from a troubled mind to a contented mind, a mind full of wisdom and creativity, to be to use the best attributes of human beings.
Yeah. I think that's we're coming towards the end, and I think it's kind of
Yeah,
like a great place to end, And again, I would say that this was the first thing that, I mean, in my 40 years of suffering, I'd been and as a psychotherapist and a qualified counselor and all sorts of other credentials, and 20 plus years in 12 steps and in psychiatric care since I was 9 years old. It's kind of like this was the first thing that I came across that really had an impact on me, that kind of brought joy and contentment into my life.
yeah,
That
yeah.
was this was the first thing, and that's why I share it and why I'm passionate about it, because there's many other ideas and theories, and I tried them all. It's kind of like, but for me, I'd had some sort of respite from my addiction, but it was like that whack-a-mole that I talked about earlier. But this was the first thing that really gave me some feeling of contentment and peace and joy.
Yeah, I just love that. And I just love what you're doing for people. And I am really grateful that you and that we worked this out where we can provide this video.
Yeah. Where can people get hold of you, Mark, if they want to speak to you?
You can email me at Dr. Dr. The abbreviation for Dr. 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 Mark Howard at Comcast.net. And my website is drmarkhoward.com.
Awesome. Okay, thank you very much, Mark.
Jason, thank you so much. Great being with you.
And you.